this morning's papers and what they made of yesterday's Jubilee celebrations. Joining me to talk through the papers are royal historians Tessa Dunlop and Kate Williams. So welcome back to both of you. There's so much to delve into, isn't there, in the papers? Well, let's just go through the front pages first of all before we talk about your choices. And we'll start with the Mirror, shall we? There it is. Together yet apart, the Cambridges and the Sussexes all attending the Queen's Jubilee service yesterday, but still keeping their distance. And it's the same story on the front of the Mail, so far apart, they say. The Times, meanwhile, has words from the Archbishop of York as he pays tribute to an absent Queen at the St Paul's service. And that service is also the front image on the Express this morning with the headline, "We give thanks." A similar sentiment leads the Telegraph. "Thank you for staying the course," is their headline. The Guardian points out that with no Queen in attendance and the next generation of royals gathering in her place, it seems like we were witnessing a new age for the monarchy. Meanwhile, away from the Jubilee, the Eye leads with the leadership concerns within the Conservative Party and a warning from Boris Johnson's allies to the rest of the party that without him at the helm, they'll lose. While the Star goes its own way, revealing that beer bellies are bad for your love life. I read that headline last hour and we didn't get to talk about it. Before you go, we're definitely going to touch on that story next hour.
Problem with beer bellies.
Problem with beer bellies. Meanwhile, other stories perhaps getting more coverage than beer bellies. The Jubilee celebrations from yesterday, once again on a majority of the front pages with some extraordinary pictures from the service in St Paul's yesterday. You picked out the coverage in the Telegraph, haven't you?
Yes, huge pictures across all the front. I mean, these are gigantic pictures. I think we can put them up as posters on our wall, these huge pictures here. And really, I think, it's fascinating because there's also, the world coverage, papers all over the world are covering this, there's wall-to-wall coverage all over the world, and it really shows us that we're never going to see this again. A platinum jubilee, 70 years on the throne. I don't think we're going to see another queen in our lifetime, but certainly not a jubilee like this, a silver, golden. I mean, it really is, I think, an incredible occasion, and there's an awful lot of, I think we were talking about some of the front pages, trying to sort of talk about rifts between the Sussexes and between the Cambridges, but really what we saw was a family coming together and supporting the Queen.
And yet you do get that sense, don't you? We saw the arrivals to St Paul's Cathedral, and there's a lot of interpretation of who's talking to who and who's arriving when, which kind of car they're getting out of. There is a kind of family soap opera that people are intrigued by.
Absolutely. This is sort of eye candy. Forget the Restoration era. It's quite extraordinary the way that we're sort of picking over the pictures. And even, Kate, they're opening the Telegraph and showing us the pictures, the optics, the way in which newspapers choose to cover this. Very significant. And in the Telegraph, which is a hugely pro-royal paper, their big blow-up are the Sussexes. And then to the side, we have the Cambridges.
But is that because the Sussexes sell papers? I mean, there is a real interest in them,
I think they do sell papers, and this is why it's so entertaining when people criticise them for getting so much attention. Well, it's not. I mean, they don't choose. They turn up to the service, and there are huge pictures of them everywhere, and people are fascinated by them. And really, I think that what we hope is that we're going to move forward from the idea that sort of cool things about Meghan and Harry are going to sell papers, and perhaps more neutral coverage.
You'd be very glad to hear that in the interest of research, I got up early to check Hello magazine, and it has confirmed that thanks to the Duchess of Sussex, we should all now have smoky eyes. So next hour, wait for our eye makeup.
Thank you for that very important update, and thank you for your duty in getting up so early. But other arrivals obviously scrutinised as well. Boris Johnson, for example, I think this is picked up in some of the papers
as well.
This was
a huge political parade. I mean, which ex-Prime Minister wasn't there, and who were they sitting next to? Of course, that all got sort of pushed to the side because everyone was checking out the Sussexes and Cambridge's body language. But I thought it was very interesting. In comes Boris. We all now know that he was booed a bit, but his reading, of course, he was the man standing up giving the New Testament reading. And I don't know if any of you drilled into the detail, but the Guardian certainly did. They note that he stood up and quoted from the New Testament, "Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure. Think about such things." In the context of our Prime Minister, perhaps don't dwell too hard. And then moving on to page 15, they point out how Boris Johnson has lost the trust of the female Tory voter. And you knew all about this, Kate. The Waitrose woman, apparently that is who Boris has got to woo and is failing to at the moment.
Yes, well, apparently Tony Blair, if we remember, had to woo Worcester woman. That was who he had to woo. And now it's the Waitrose woman, and this is a new survey, who is middle-class Southern and doesn't like the culture wars. And really, he has completely failed to win her. So certainly, we saw, I think, Boris Johnson being sort of really told off by Mumsnet. I think the Partygate in particular has lost the female voter. So, and this is a very interesting story here in the Mirror. Give Johnson a royal reprieve. Wait until after Jubilee to oust him. So there's some talk of a no confidence vote, really post Partygate, which I think the Jubilee has thrown into relief. The fact that the Queen was sitting on her own to mourn her husband night before a riotous party in Downing Street. Now the PM wasn't there, but it was a whole the Sue Gray report really pinned down. There was a whole drinking culture that he was really very much part of.
And interestingly, it's Tobias Ellwood, seen as a Tory rebel as far as this is concerned, who's making this call. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because you wonder whether there are MPs over this weekend who are considering whether or not to put in a letter to the 1922 committee, or whether they'll sit on their hands and let the Jubilee celebrations run their course.
I think they'll let it run the course. It won't have helped him, of course, that the super royalist audience have been seen to come out and actively boo him, and that's quite a thing to do outside a Thanksgiving service at St Paul's. This Guardian article making the point that women were more deeply affected by the pandemic. They tended to be stuck at home looking after elderly people, working on the front line in supermarkets and in the care profession, and therefore have been impacted and perhaps take issue with what many see as double standards. On the subject of Tobias Ellwood, of course, he's been very strong on the Ukrainian war. Likewise, people have felt that Boris Johnson has taken an impressive front foot on that. He's a bit of a gambler. Gambling doesn't sometimes pay off. It's worth bearing in mind, and this incidentally has massively fallen down the news coverage because of the Jubilee, that we're 100 days on from the beginning of the Ukrainian war, and the Independent does a sort of a fairly stark numbers crunch of what this means. 60 to 100 Ukrainian soldiers alone dying per day, 6.8 million displaced Ukrainians, 1.4 billion people potentially affected by the grain and fertilizer shortage. At the beginning there was this brinkmanship, can we risk a nuclear war? Well, actually, arguably, the food shortages are going to kill a huge number of people. We're going to have to make some difficult choices.
But it'll affect people around the world, won't it? And it's extraordinary that we mark that milestone. I think it was yesterday that the 100 days was passed, wasn't it? Obviously being reported in today's papers, given the fact that Putin clearly felt that he could wrap it up within a few days. It is extraordinary that it's still going on and no sign of it ending at the moment. And the Mirror picks up coverage as well, doesn't it?
The Mirror picks up the coverage of here, talking about war crimes investigators, fears that 200,000 children have been deported over the border, talking about 1.2 million deportees. Really, this picture here, house in ruins in Kiev, really reminding us of the human cost of these numbers that Tessa was really pulling out there. And yes, you're exactly right. So obviously the international community chose to put sanctions on Russia, but the problem is that this has given a boost to some of the Russian economy. So really, what you see is Putin really in here for the long haul. In 100 days, we never thought this was going to happen in this way. And I mean, this is what the fear is, and I think what we're concerned about is that it's fallen off the front pages. That people might get forgotten, and Ukraine really might have to give up.
We must leave it there. Plenty more from you in the next hour, but we must wrap up for now. Do stay with us. Lots more on the Queen's Platinum Jubilee coming up.